All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome. We got our first look at Lost Caverns of Ixalan today. All new mechanics, a bunch of new cards, a lot of things to go over. Let's start right here, right now. It's C-Note Scout, probably saying that wrong. 1 mana for a 1/1 when it ETBs Explores. Of course, Explore is one of the main mechanics in the original Ixalan set. Explore means you reveal top card of your library. If it's a land, you draw it. And if it's not a land, you bin it and then put a counter on it. Really powerful ability. Jade Light Ranger and the 2-drop one that explored were very, very good. And we're also give this card is going to be a 1/1 for 1 that either draws you a card or mills a card. It's a 2/2 for 1 that mills, which is great. So these cards really, really solid. You got uncommon here. Looks really nice. Explore will be in the set in multiple ways, as we're about to see in our next card, which is Explore taken up a notch, if you will. Jade Light Spelunker. Everyone loves a good Spelunker, right? Green and X, EDB, Explore X times. So 1/1. So that's pretty powerful, right? Say X is 2, right? So we're going to play this. So 1/1 explores twice. Obviously a lot worse than Jade Light Ranger, right? Jade Light Ranger was a 2/1 that explored twice, which is obviously a pretty big power boost. But being able to scale in late game is pretty awesome. You know, this isn't as good as the Merfolk Branchwalker was, the 2-drop Explore creature, but being able to scale is pretty cool. And once you get into like, 4, 5, 6 mana or whatever, it's pretty insane, honestly. It can draw you a lot of cards. It can bin a lot of cards for self-mill stuff, which is kind of cool. And pretty fun one. Kind of an interesting look at the mechanic. We're not used to being able to explore that many times from one card, but pretty cool. We also found out what map tokens are. That's right, a map token. There was like 1 or 2 spoiled cards that mentioned a map token, but no one knew what that was, obviously. Well, now we know. It's just like a clue or a blood. It's an artifact that's made by certain effects, and has 1 tap and sacrifice, and you get to make target creature explore. So, of course, exploring, once again, is the land thing, either a counter or a land. And that's a pretty good effect, honestly, as far as drawing a land or making a counter. Later in the game, obviously, you're not going to necessarily want to draw a land, but it will clear it off top of your deck, kind of scry-wise for your limited decks, can be very, very good as well. And this card is really good, right? As we've learned from Boldaren, Epicure, 3-bit Inspector, a 1 mana card at a decent rate that makes a piece of material, rectangles or whatever, is pretty good. So I think this card's going to see play in probably multiple formats, probably a pauper card as well as seen play elsewhere. Not a fairy, unfortunately, for standard, but it's a Siren Pirate, which might matter. But 1 flyer for 1 with a good amount of upside is pretty cool. And it can just target itself, right? It's sort of like think of it like a 2 mana, either 1/1 flyer, which draws a land, or a 2/2 flyer for 2, which is also reasonable too. So pretty awesome card, honestly. Spy Gust Siren's a nice one, and pretty cool for other formats as well. Moving on to our next mechanic, especially the most wild one here. We've got Discover. Geological Expressor is a 4 mana 3/2. When it ETBs, if you cast it, Discover 3. Discover is exile cards top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So, wait a minute. That sound familiar? It's just Cascade, right? So it's just Cascade with 2 major differences. The first being that it's Cascade with a number. So it's not just, locked to the mana cost of a card. Cascade was always, search for a card that costs 1 less or fewer than the card that cast it, so you couldn't chain them. This card is obviously templated the same way, but as we'll see, there are other Discover numbers where the number can be higher, can be lower, which is kind of crazy, honestly. And then the other important part is you can put the card into your hand instead of casting it. So in Limited, say you have a Giant Growth or a Counterspell, one of the biggest problems with Cascade was you couldn't play it with counterspells or conditional cards because you can't afford to hit a counterspell off it and have it do nothing. Now you get to put it in your hand, so just draw a card, which is pretty good as well. So this is a crazy one, because obviously Cascade cards are busted in Modern because of how they interact with the 0 mana spells. These work there also. Tybalt Valky, I don't know, they changed the rules on Cascade. I don't know, they made the rules globally change. I have to check on that one. But Cascade is a big woo, red flag mechanic. It's funny because I remember seeing recently someone saying that Cascade was really high on the Storm scale. Storm, Dredge, the mechanics they would never reproduce. And then bam, here it is right now. So kind of a sort of fixed Cascade, but not really fixed in the ways that matter as far as why it's so broken. But a pretty powerful mechanic we'll see here. And we can see here on other effects. So hit the Mother Loads a 7 mana sorcery with Discover 10. So you can see here now we're cascading into cards that are larger. So this will cascade into a card that costs 10 or less. And then if you hit a card that costs less than 10, get them any treasures, which is kind of cool. This card's probably not very good because obviously cascading, you want to play cheap cards and try and hit the same card every time, not hit anything in your deck. But can hit itself, which is cute, I guess. But kind of interesting card. So we got Cascade. We also have another take on Threshold. We have the ever-flowing well here with the mechanic Descend 8. So 3-mana artifact, ETB, mill 2, draw 2. So just a divination with upside, which is pretty good, honestly. That also plays well with Yorion and things like that. But has Descend 8. Beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, transform this. So Descend basically means threshold, but there's a number. So a threshold was always 7 cards. This is, a threshold for a certain number, but it is only permanent cards. So very important, it does not count instant sorceries, which is obviously the easiest way to fill your graveyard. Brainstorm, Thought Scour, Lightning Bolt, cantrips, whatever. So not going to play as well as you might think it would with cards that are usually go to threshold, but obviously will matter as far as milling things. Will play well with Explore, obviously, and self-mill stuff. And this is, so we see the return here of the flip lands. Of course, Search for Azcanta and Friends, kind of a loved set of cards from Ixalan. And same thing here, we have the Myriad Pools, taps for a blue. Whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana with this, up to 1 target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell to end of turn. So pretty powerful, turn your land into a creature or whatever it might be. But kind of a fun card. And again, the front side here is just so good. Just like 3 mana divination mill with upside is pretty sweet. It's also permanent as well, so kind of a cool one. And then we see let's skip this actually on. We also have Fathomless Descent, which is also cares about the graveyard, but rather than putting a number on it, it just counts instead. So this is basically like a Tarmogoyf kind of card. 2 mana for a spirit. Additional cost to cast a spell. Discard a card is like a permanent, which is a pretty big deal. And then it is the size of permanent cards in your graveyard, and then toughness +1. It's a Tarmogoyf style card that counts the permanents in your graveyard. And we see it uses the Descent wording, but instead of having a number, it just says Fathomless, meaning it just counts them, which is kind of weird, honestly. That's a really kind of obtuse way to look at Descent as a mechanic, but we'll get used to it, I guess. It's kind of weird, but pretty cool card, obviously. If you play this in, Madness of Fiery Temper, or discard a card you want to discard, it's kind of cool. It's kind of an enabler for that, as well as being just a card that could be big if you're self-milling. So kind of a cool card. A lot of self-mill and standard. We'll see how that plays. And then our last mechanic is another weird one. Craft. So you have the Enigma Jewel here. This is apparently a really, really important artifact in the story. 1 blue for a legendary artifact. EDB's tapped and taps for 2 colorless. Anyone? Is that any Soul Ring fans out there? However, any Omen Hawker fans out there, it taps only for mana to activate abilities. Now, I love Omen Hawker. I think it's a really, really good, really, really underplayed card. Very, very powerful effect. Now we're getting it on an artifact. Oh, it does come in taps. You can't use it immediately. Then it has the ability Craft with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities. So, what the hell is Craft? Craft is pay a mana cost, exile the artifact that you're activating, and then exile the 4 or more cards. The wording here is really weird. Exile the 4 or more cards from among other permanents you control and or cards in your graveyard. So basically what this is you're going to take this and then 4 or more other permanents you control or permanent cards from your graveyard and put them all together. Or exile them all. You're kind of crafting them. You're getting rid of them and making a new thing at sorcery speed. So a lot of caveats here. Pretty weird mechanic. And when you do this, so spend 9 mana, exile this, exile 4 more other permanents from your graveyard or play, you get Locus of Enlightenment, which is a legendary artifact. It has each activated ability of the exiled card used to craft it. So exiled, obviously. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. But whenever you activate an ability that's not a mana ability, you copy it. So pretty powerful. Lightning Crafter, Bolt twice or whatever. Probably a better activated ability than that one. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. But so a pretty powerful card, but really, really slow and difficult to use. 9 mana, a bunch of cards. It's probably more of a commander card, honestly. But pretty expensive, pretty crazy. And that's the one of the weirder mechanics of a set. So we have some pretty weird mechanics here, obviously. We have like a pseudo Cascade, a pseudo Threshold, and this weird crafty mechanic. The return of Explore, obviously, some flip lands and stuff. A lot of things going on in the set, honestly. It's kind of weird, this is happening amidst all the Marvel hype, and the Fallout hype, and the Final Fantasy hype, and the Doctor Who hype. A lot of hype happening right now, all right? So everyone take a breath, take a second, and we got a lot more cards to come. We got 10 new brews coming, we got a set review coming, and we got Bronze Mythic coming. We'll all be looking for dates on those. Should be exciting. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I'm Jim Davis, Magic Player, full-time content creator, and let's go. Dinosaurs, Pirates.